less expected. We profess to be shocked at one or another of these outlandish crimes, but the shock wears off quickly in an environment in which the rape, murder, and humiliation of females is not only a staple of the news, but an important cornerstone of the nation's entertainment. The mainstream culture is filled with the most gruesome forms of misogyny, and pornography is a multi-billion-dollar industry, much of it controlled by mainstream U.S. corporations. And I think, as Susie was saying, that, to her thinking the legal system and the courts, well, it's far beyond that. It's
Absolutely.
The entire culture of male entitlement and male aggression. And one of the things that I have learned in my international feminist activism is that discrimination breeds violence against females, both women and girls, because it sets up a relationship where essentially one half of the species is dominant and superior to the other half, and this discrimination, which we often think of in the American context in terms of race, but is as much, if not more so, in the context of gender, that when you place them in unequal positions, then the lesser person is much easier not only to discriminate against, but commit violent acts against.
I know when I went down to Mexico for my classes, it was a 10-day excursion, and I talked with a woman there. I was unexpected that I would be talking about domestic violence with them. It was something that they just started to talk about. They couldn't talk about, or else they would be severely punished, or they would be isolated even more. But they told me, how about they could get together. And it was just different to hear in another country that with this domestic violence going on, just starting. And it's a global, like you say, for the domestic
it goes on
violence.
through the ages. I just had to study Chinese foot binding, which ended in 1920, but these women are having their feet broken and tipped over,
yes.
and their toes
They had to have
crushed,
small feet.
and then bound by their mothers for 2 years on a daily basis. Why? Because it turned men on, so that they could get a better husband and have a better life financially.
Right. A mutilation.
The female genital mutilation in Africa, and how about the witch burning in the 16th century? I mean, we're talking global, ongoing pattern of misogynistic, patriarchal culture. And we're looking to change. Feminism has changed from 30 years ago. We considered it radical, with Mary Daly talking about all these things, all these forms of wanting to get our equal rights, bra burning and all that stuff. But we don't want to annihilate men off the face of the earth.
No.
We simply want to be treated equally.
Right.
It's morally and ethically the right thing to do. I want to be able to work and make more than 76 cents to the dollar if I'm doing the same job that a man
Right.
is. But more importantly, since we're here on violence, I don't want to have power over me. As Patricia Evans says in her book, what's the name of it?
As well as we don't,
Emotional
we're not saying that we want power over them either. And
We're
I don't
seeking-
mind a man opening and closing my door. I'm
Right,
not
we're
saying
seeking
that.
personal
because it puts you in a
empowerment.
passive position when the man is holding, because you're just a light,
can't open
physically
the door.
frail type. You
God
can't
forbid we
do
should
it for
have
yourself.
independent thoughts, right?
But
Patricia
they're doing it to
Evans,
be
the
kind,
verbally
right?
abusive relationship, that's what I was talking about.
Right.
She explains how men who abuse have a sense of entitlement and a need for power over others. Whether it's women or not, many of them, it doesn't matter. They just have this need to have power over. Whereas women and most people who aren't abusive just generally want to empower themselves.
Right. Well,
And this is the difference. We want to stop a culture that is perpetuating that.
Right. It's just the controlling over another, because like I said, there's a...
And I think it's important to bring up in this context, so often as Americans in the United States, we think, well, women have equal rights. Well, you can look at Iran and the Sudan, and women are just really just beasts of burden, but that's not the case in the United States. Well, an interesting fact that most Americans don't know is that there is a United Nations International Treaty for Women. The acronym, it's known as CEDAW,
I
which
didn't
is
know
the
this.
Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. And here's a shocker. There are 191 countries within the United Nations system, practically every country on the planet. 185 out of 191 have ratified this treaty. The United States is one of only 6 countries on the planet that has not. And the other countries that have not are not developed countries like the UK or France or Italy. It's Iran, Palau, Sudan, Somalia. It's a nefarious position for the
God
United
enlighten
States
us
to be
as to
in.
why that is.
Right.
Simply because for a long time now, the United States nationally has been dominated by conservative administrations and a conservative Congress that has been opposed to passage of this, because anything that's related to women's rights, and then it automatically starts to be, well, it's abortion, and these, these side issues. But amazingly, in 1979, the UN General Assembly ratified this treaty. Jimmy Carter was president, signed the treaty. But international treaties, the way United States government works, is they must have advice and consent by 2/3 of the US Senate. And every time it has come up through the Senate Foreign Relations Committee and nearly went to the Senate floor for a full vote, the Senate always recessed before that happened. So now has been very involved in this issue. And I actually lobbied on behalf of Amnesty International. So there are many human rights organizations. And a very important point is that women's rights are human rights. That is the international call, the international cry. Because if there is a universal recognition that all human beings have certain basic rights, rights to equal treatment, rights to food, rights to education, rights to employment and with payment at a fair wage. Well, women have those rights as well. And so a violation of women's rights is a violation of human rights, and that's what CEDAW represents and seeks to redress.
So I haven't heard of that. I'm sure much haven't, but anyone tried to do anything to get anything further with this?
Well, actually, former Senator Joe Biden, who was the chair of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, is a strong supporter of CEDAW, and he's now vice president of the United States, fortunately. And there's a real movement to get this passed through the Foreign Relations Committee, bring it before the full Senate for a vote. But there's a sort of caveat that the United States employs, which is referred to as RUDs. There are reservations, understandings, and declarations. Essentially, they say, okay, we'll ratify this international treaty, but we don't like A, and we don't like B, and we don't like C. Therefore, we're not going to comply with any of those aspects of the treaty. So in essence, it nullifies the treaty, and it really negates the whole purpose of ratifying the treaty in the first place. So we have a double-edged challenge here, which is not only to ratify CEDAW, but to ratify it without any of these RUDs, which will nullify the whole treaty. So we're planning in March a nationwide campaign, and I would urge all of your viewers who have an interest in the subject, and they can contact me through my email address, and I'll be happy to send them more information. But there are many local kinds of activities that can take place. First, to educate your community about the fact that this international treaty, which 95+% of the globe has ratified, the United States has not, and American women need this. They need this for equal pay. They need this for protection against violence.
77 cents on the dollar.
Across the board, every single issue. And also, we're trying to come out of the Bush years where the United States internationally was seen as a pariah, a violator of human rights rather than a supporter of human rights. And this is concrete action that the U.S. can take to say to the rest of the world, we really are on the part of human rights. And we express equal rights for not only American women, but for all women in every country.
That's what I call breaking the mold.
Yes, thank you very much, and I hope we can. I hope that goes through in March. That's this March coming, right?
We're planning activities all over the country, so we'll be putting. I've just put together some toolkits that people can use, fact sheets if they want to lobby. Here in Connecticut, Senator Dodd, Senator Lieberman.
Can anybody volunteer or anything?
Absolutely.
Calling that number on the screen. Please call.
The more the better. The more we're looking for all the help and assistance we can get.
Well, we have about a minute and a half, so can we throw in something that's really...
Well, just to top that off, feminism is not a four-letter word anymore, folks. This is what it looks like. We don't want to have power over anybody. We want to have our own empowerment and be right up there in equality with men living happily and harmoniously.
Absolutely, absolutely. I wrote something, I don't know if we have time, but probably the most egregious situation that women in the world face is in Afghanistan. And for now, I had written a piece, and it speaks to each new day seems to bring with it another unthinkable atrocity against the women and girls of Afghanistan. The roster of infamy reads like something out of the Nazi terror. A law passed and signed by the president sanctioning marital rape. Acid thrown in the faces of girls walking to school. Women forced to make themselves invisible with suffocating head-to-toe covering that puts the yellow stars of David Jews were forced to wear to shame. Never has misogyny been so blatant or so blatantly repellent. And I think women and all people in the United States need to take a strong step forward to say, we will not allow this to happen to any of our sisters, wives, mothers, girlfriends around the world or in this country to continue. We finally say, no, enough is enough.
That's right. No.
Amen.
Well, thank you very much, Kathy and Susie, for coming and come again. And thank you for watching my show, and I'll tune in next week. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
She stands before the crowd and says, hello, my name is Megan. In case you're wondering, that means me again. You see, everything she's lived through has only changed her on the inside, but her hair, her face, her eyes, the same Megan. Yeah, it's Megan. The ones who knew you only knew you as Megan. But you know I can see right through to the strength, the courage, how you fought to be you. She laughs and says, yeah, Megan is me all over again. She looks at all the faces full of silent admiration. One by seem to